Okay, I think that everything's good. So let's kick off the first webinar by TWINO ever. I see that already 26 people are joining and is watching now. We had a small hiccup with the first link, so I hope that everything will be fine from now. And I will just briefly tell you about the webinar itself. So with me today, there's our partner, so business partner in real estate sphere, Edgars, and he is leading the real estate projects on TWINO. He has broad experience in the sector, and he will tell about that himself as well. Afterwards, I will move towards agenda, and then we will continue with the topics that we have today. Also, you will be able to ask your questions on Slido app. You can find the Slido app link on the blog post that we have. I think that it's also shared on Facebook, on YouTube stream as well. So it's basically available everywhere. You can ask your questions. You can also ask your questions on YouTube, but honestly, we'll try to follow Slido questions at first. So I think it's better to pick that one. And you can also upvote your questions the questions that are the most interesting to you. We'll try to finish up this webinar in 40 to 45 minutes. It will be partly presentation and partly also your questions. If you'll have any additional questions, of course, you'll be able to ask them either on our social or through email or whichever communication is easier for you. So with that being it from my side for now, I will give the floor also to Edgars so that he could greet all of you and give a small introduction of himself.
Thank you, Robert. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my first experience having presenting on live in a webinar. So please give me some discount for not doing it very professionally yet. I will briefly introduce with myself. I have been involved in real estate since 2004. So I have technically I have a very long history with the real estate industry. Luckily, I was also involved in the real estate when the previous crisis happened. So this will be some topic I would like to discuss as well. I have been working in several, let's say, disciplines, starting as a broker, also working in Colliers International as a consultant, then working in a bank as a restructuring manager, and recently I've been involved with several residential development projects and investment transactions in Riga real estate market. Also, which is not a secret, I have had experience with a crowdfunding platform, previously working together with a crowd estate. So I would say I've been involved in real estate from very different angles, starting from the investment side, also with the sales side. So I'm very open for your questions and would like to have a fruitful discussion during this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Edgars, for information about you. And I guess you will also tell about the projects that you are involved now in a bit. So the next part that I would like to really share with you is basically our agenda. And to do that, I will try to share my screen. It will be in a format of PowerPoint presentation. So sharing the screen right now and going to agenda. So the first thing that I will tell you about is TWINO Ventures. So I will introduce the project, so the concept of the project itself. I will also tell you briefly about TWINO, because I would assume that some of you might not be that familiar about TWINO in the past, if you are especially focusing on real estate investing, because that's something new for us. Then I will move forwards with the topic, which is real estate investment opportunities and challenges, which will be led by Edgars, as he already mentioned. So nowadays, the economy is, a bit more challenging than usually because of COVID outburst, so this epidemic globally. And it's a good opportunity also to dive deeper in the real estate topic in times like this, and Edgars will cover that. Then afterwards, we'll also cover the first TWINO venture. So you are already maybe familiar with that because it's available on our website for a bit more than 1 week already. So our investors have been able to invest in this project. New investors will still be able to invest it because currently it's 30% funded. So there's still room for your investments. And then finally, we will finalize everything with live Q&A. So feel free to ask your questions on Slido. Once again, you'll have like 10 to 20 minutes to do that until we move to the questions and answers section. So during our presentations, feel free to ask any questions that you have and upvote the questions that really matter to you the most. So I will start with the presentation. So in general, I will tell you about TWINO at first and how it all started. So here you can see a couple of pictures that maybe give you some memories about the previous financial crisis, which happened in 2008. And that is also the beginning of TWINO, because in the past crisis, we saw that there was not that many financing available for regular consumers. So in that with mind, our founder, Armāns Broks, decided to introduce online lending in Latvia. And that's the first market where we started to operate. And ever since then, it's still our headquarters. So in this time, more than 10 years, we already have been in many, many countries. So currently we're operating in 5 operationally now. Since then, we have helped 1.7 million people. So 1.7 million consumers have actually borrowed money using our services. And they have had an access to more than 1 billion of funding. We reached this milestone just last year. And we are pretty proud of doing that and reaching this kind of volumes in this period of time. Then the next thing happened. So we understood that, okay, we have this one side of the business, which is lending operations. And we sort of understood that there's a lot of problems still in the market, and the access to capital is one of them. But the other side is that investments are quite difficult to understand for the regular retail investors. So there's available stocks that might be extremely expensive to buy if you use some brokerage or a bank. Sometimes the commission to buy one share of particular stock is more than 10 or 20 euros. So obviously, if you want to test it out, it's pretty expensive, and you will lose your fee initially, and then it will take some time until you get it back. Then there's also other type of investments that are more riskier, like cryptocurrencies, which is something that generates maybe some good returns, but at the same time, it's extremely volatile. So you might lose some of your investments as well. It all happened in 2015. So we decided that maybe it's really good idea to introduce our concept of peer-to-peer lending, where we sort of connect both sides. So the lending side with the investing side. And with that in mind, we introduced our platform. Investors had the opportunity to invest into our loans that we are issuing in our lending countries. And since that time, we have had quite a success. We have been recognized by multiple prominent media, such as Forbes, the Wall Street Journal, also German press as Frankfurter Allgemeine and Handelsblatt, as pretty large part of investors come from Germany. They have had really good returns on our platform. So TWINO investment platform works as a basically fixed income generating investment, as we give a fixed interest rate for all the loans, all the investments that we offer on the platform. And on average, it's around 11%. So the loans come starting from 8 to 12%. Now we have even increased it to 14%. Investors mostly come from Germany, UK, Netherlands, also Latvia, because we are here. Altogether, there are now more than 20,000. And they have helped those 1.7 million people across the countries that we are operating in. Partially of that has also been funded from our balance sheet, but as the investors joined in 2015, they helped with pretty big part of that. So they have funded more than 650 million of that aforementioned 1 billion. So it's more than 60% that comes from actually our investors, which is something that we are really proud of. And I think that investors recognize our product as something interesting for them and worth investing. And now going to the final section, basically, of my presentation. So what is next for TWINO? That is something that we are thinking about probably constantly. We're always looking for new development opportunities. And this time, we really think that the next logical step for us might be real estate investments. And with that in mind, we have introduced TWINO Ventures, which is something that will let you invest in investments that are secured by real estate. So in our case, the first project is already live, and investors can see a development project, and you will hear about that in a bit. But apart from that, we'll continue to add new projects that might be something similar to this one in real estate sector. And I believe that also one day it will be something even more. So new kind of investments will come as well. So how it works, I already saw a couple of questions on Slido about the mechanism, so the legal structure, how it works, but going step by step. So the usual pipeline of how we find projects and how they sort of go to the platform is that the first step is usually that our real estate team goes through multiple projects. So they have some in the pipeline. Some of those goes to the final step, but there are a lot of projects that don't go to the final step because in between those steps is basically all the analysis, all the decision-making process, putting together the business case and understanding whether it's a good idea to invest in this particular project. So it's basically our due diligence and our planning together with our real estate team. If we decide that this is a good project, then we go to the third step, which is issuing a loan. In this case, at least if we operate in Latvia, we have already one loan originator that is issuing consumer and business loans. It's called Moneza, and the legal entity is SIA OC Finance. And that's why you will see also this entity in assignment agreements when you invest in those loans. So in this case, we have already issued 250 euros to entity that is developing this first project. And this money comes initially from OC Finance, which is our daughter company. And afterwards, as the loan is issued, we list it on the platform, and you as an investors see the loan, and you can have the opportunity to finance part of it. The smallest possible investment in a loan is 100 euro. So it's something that I believe hasn't happened like 10 years ago. It couldn't happen because real estate sector is also infamous about being accessible to only at least really small part of people, because you need quite a big capital to invest in real estate. But in our case, you can start with 100 euros and understand whether it is something of interest to you. So the key things that we would like to emphasize is that those are secured loans. So it's something a bit different than usually on our platform. 12% interest, which is really high, and it comes together with the security. So there's real collateral behind it, so real estate. And we are selecting the investment opportunities. And that's why we have this in-house team that is partnering up with us to look for great opportunities for you. And this is the team behind the project. So you can see Edgars as well right here in live, but he's also joined by 3 other team members that have broad experience in real estate and finance as well. So they are working on these real estate development projects like all the time, and that's their key task basically on a daily basis. I hope that wasn't too long for you to give it an introduction into TWINO and TWINO Ventures as well. And I would be happy to, at this point, give the floor to Edgars and also remind you that you don't forget to ask your questions if you have some, and do it on Slido so that we can see which are the most popular ones. So I'm giving the floor back to Edgars, and I will be stopping to share my screen at this point.
Thank you, Robert. I will start this section of the webinar with wishes. So everyone who is listening and watching the webinar, I wish you everyone a good health and stay healthy. Try to get the best of this time. Let's say, for instance, remote working has helped a lot of people now finding new ways how they actually can work more efficiently. So my first wish is, of course, it's about staying healthy in this time. So then looking at the real estate sector in these challenging times, I most probably will try to avoid providing some forecasts what will happen, because this crisis is it's a health crisis. So I think that the best forecasts can be provided by the health specialists. But of course, we all see that it impacts the economy, and of course, it impacts the real estate sector. So I'll just provide my comments on how I see it will affect the real estate sector in the upcoming months. So I would also kind of try to say that it's a big difference what happened in 2007, 2008, 2009, and what's happening right now. At least in Latvia, it is totally different situation in terms of the budget deficit, in terms of the structure of the economy. So I would say we are in much, much better shape today than we were in the previous crisis. Also, my assumption is that we shouldn't expect so many insolvencies and bargain deals in the market as it was 15 or 13 years ago. But there are some things which should be taken into account. First thing, what we already notice, we are in daily contact with most of brokers here in Riga. We have information that new transactions in the residential segment have mostly stopped. So the previous transactions which were initiated, buying some residential real estate, they are being finalized, but new transactions are not happening almost at all. We also see that the demand for the mortgage loans is going down. People are reevaluating their decisions. So for a few months, residential sales will be on hold. Then in terms of the commercial real estate sector, we have indications that most of the tenants are requesting some let's say, exempt from the rent payments. So some landlords are requesting for banks to get no principal payments for next few months. So I would say the cash flow in the commercial real estate segment is affected a lot. This year's net operating income for real estate funds will be, in my opinion, lower than it was expected, even though they have strong tenants. What we see in the stock exchange in Baltic market is that main players which are being traded in the Nasdaq Baltic market, for example, Eften Real Estate Fund or Baltic Horizon, or the East 9, which is traded in Nordic Nasdaq Stock Exchange, their share value or fund value has dropped on average by 25 to 30%. And I checked yesterday. I was hoping that it's a rebound now, but unfortunately, it was still dropping yesterday. So it all sounds very sad, but it's very logical. This is what is going to happen for a few weeks, most probably, and then it's going to settle down. If we look from our project's perspective, honestly, I was very lucky when the previous crisis started personally, because I didn't manage to buy a real estate and get a loan. So I wasn't affected by the decline of value. And I would say our team is quite lucky this time as well, because we had 5 transactions in the process of signing them. And now as the situation has changed, we have possibility to renegotiate the terms or to come out from these transactions. So again, I would say I'm a lucky second time in these challenging times. Nevertheless, we have now two projects which are coming to a construction phase. One is, which I will tell you much more in details, is the Hoffmann residence. This project, we were expecting to start the facade works and changing the windows on the 1st of April. We have delayed a little bit these tasks. The main reason is that we expect a decline in construction costs, which is based on two main reasons. The materials, we expect that the materials which should be used in our project, mostly they are local materials. So there is no good reason that supply chain issues could affect the delivering of these materials. But secondly, we expect that as the demand will go down, we expect that the prices of these materials will go down as well. And secondary is the labor costs in the construction market, which is a significant position in a Hoffmann residence project. And as the demand in construction market is going down, we expect that labor costs will go down. So rough estimate would be that we should get at least 20% discount from what we were expecting to spend in the construction costs before the COVID-19 crisis started. So that's how it affects in the medium term. Let's look at the 2020 or 2021, when we should expect sales of residential apartments in this sector. So just to understand, we shaped a little bit the business strategy. We shaped the business strategy with the focus that when we finish the building, we rent it out if the sales are not back on track, which is a very common practice. And it's actually financially, it's also very effective. And then we do the sales in small portions when we see that the market is back, the demand is back. I think that we will have advantage in the market when it's back on track because of the fact that there will be a lack of competition. Most of the projects are being on hold as they were dependent on the bank financing, and banks are limiting their financing for the residential development. So that's about the sales. What else could I comment? Yes, we see that it's a very good time also to do a design right now, because when the market is back on track, then the construction makes sense for the commercial real estate segment. Most probably it will affect a little bit the office segment as everybody will start working from home, and I assume that the average demand per employee per office space will go a little bit down, as there will be new ways how the companies will restructure, let's say, where the employees are based. My assumption is that as few months the people will get used to working remotely, I assume that this will be a routine of several companies in the market, that their employees will have chance to work, let's say, few days a week remotely, or they will have activity-based office where nobody has a fixed desk, which again limits the square meters per employee in the office. So nevertheless, I think that in 2020, if we don't see a pandemic crisis continuing more than a few months, then in 2021 we should see real estate market working as it should. The question is what will be the product or will be demanded by the customers. I think that here we see that it's going to be changed between some very speculative projects. They might have challenges, but the ones which have been thought over, who is the buyer for what type of product it is, how many square meters, how many rooms, etc. If the project is thought over, I think they should do very well in the 2021. That's a small comment about expected challenges in the real estate market.
Okay, thank you, Edgars. And I think we'll be coming back to a couple of things that you already mentioned when we will try to answer your questions that you have been sending in. I see that there's already, at least a couple of minutes ago, there was already almost 20 questions. So we will try to prioritize them by seeing the ones which are the most upvoted by you as well. Okay, but now going back to the next topic that we would like to cover, which is the first TWINO Venture project, which is available on our website. And you can just also check it there by going to TWINO EU and then Ventures section. But we would also like to give you an update, a bit more pictures and a bit more detailed information on the plans. And that's why I'm giving the floor back to Edgars, and he will share a small presentation about the topic as well.
Thank you, Roberts. Yes, a small introduction about how we started the partnership with TWINO and TWINO founder Armand Broks is that last autumn we defined that we'll do a strategic partnership in the real estate sector. The main, let's say, challenge what I saw before in these crowdfunding and peer-to-peer lending platforms and the real estate projects being presented there is that there is a lot of risk premium involved in the interest rate, which depends on the relationship with the borrower. So I think that the most effective way when there is full control of the project development in-house. So that's how we started in last autumn. The first transaction we did was this Hoffmann residences, which is a building in Kuģu 13. Since last autumn, I think we have reviewed 300 to 400 investment opportunities. Some of them we have done very in-depth due diligence. In some of them we have already agreed about the sales contract, but we haven't signed it yet. So I would say that we have looked through the market everywhere. If there is any investment opportunities, we have negotiated the terms, the prices, we have defined the product that we see in the market. So this work what we did for half a year, I think it's going to result very well also in the upcoming months, as we really have in our list several opportunities we're going to continue working further. But now I would like to tell a bit more about Hoffmann Residence, this project in Kuģu Street 13 in the very central part of Riga city. So I will share my screen. There is a very small presentation with a few slides, so you can see a bit more details about this project. But what we did is that after acquisition of this property, we started to work on the product. This we consider as the most important part in terms of real estate development. So just kind of give a brief overview. So the location is very central, and you see in the background, this is a national library. So this is I will give a comment about location a bit further. The sellable area of the building is 2,809 square meters. This is including 50 apartments and 9 lofts on the base floor. Then we have 6 garages, which can be, and you can add 4 more garages, and I'll explain you then further on in the layout. Then we have 4 floors, and we are trying to achieve additional floor in the construction board, which will take us for a couple of months more. And then we have 4 lifts. So basically for each staircase, there will be a lift, which is considered as a very demanded option in this segment of real estate. So in terms of location, some of you are locals who are listening to this webinar, but most of you most probably are not very familiar with the Riga city. So the Riga city is on 2 shores of Daugava River. And the old town is on the right shore, and this project is on the left shore. The main center is around the river. And so as you see the letter H, that's where the project is located. Here you see that the old town is just across the river, and the protected view is the view of the old town. And from the windows of this project, Hoffmann Residence, many residents will see every morning sun rising above the old town. So this could be considered as main selling point of this project. Also, we have all the public transport, all the amenities you would wish for. You have 2 bridges nearby, so it's easy access to the other side of the city. You have one of the largest parks in Riga, which is Uzvaras Parks. So basically, this location is in the between the largest park and between the old town, which is the very heart of the city. Then this is a visual representation after the renovation of the building. In this particular picture, you can see the additional floor on the top. In our existing business model, we have excluded the income from the top floor. So this is still as an additional profit position in the business plan. And we expect in a couple of months to get the final decision from the authorities if we are allowed to build this additional floor. Then here you see from the other side the building. So the building is in a U shape. So it has an access from 3 streets and it has 4 staircases. Nearby there is also a new residential development which is on sale right now. Honestly, this is considered as very premium area. As you see that this new development next to our project, for us, the average, let's say, premium price for the apartments, which will see the river, is around 2,500 euros per square meter. Then just an indication, the neighboring building is selling 4,000, 4,500 euros per square meter. So we would say that we are considering more as an upper medium segment rather than premium, what is in the neighboring building. And here is just a visualization how the building will look after the renovation with the lights and the lighting project. A small comment about how we did the floor plan layout, which is what I mentioned about the product. So of course, it's very easy to do a unified design for the building, but we divided the building in different, let's say, product groups. So the part of the building which is facing the river, so on the top of the picture, this part has larger apartments which will be more luxury, and it will have 2 independent staircases with lifts. And these are mostly 2-room or 1-bedroom or 3-room or 2-bedroom apartments, and few 3-bedroom or 4-room apartments. And then the part which is facing the yard, or let's say it on the bottom of the page, this is designed differently. It has much more compact apartments, less rooms, and this is considered as some of the buyers most probably will buy to rent it out, as it's a very good location for a rental business as well. And the prices for the unit will be lower, but as well as the sizes of the apartment will be more compact. Then looking at the base floor, we defined a new product which we call a loft. So basically, we will have 9 lofts, which will have very lofty design, of course. And also we'll have 6 garages, which can be extended to 10 garages on the base floor. This was a brief introduction about the project. Our plan or the schedule for the project was to do facade and the windows and the strengthening of constructions this summer. Then in the autumn, we plan to finalize the new lifts and the yard. So we were expecting by the end of the year that the construction works will be finished. As I mentioned before, we are considering that we should get much more attractive offers in the construction market. So we are now fishing for new offers. We'll wait most probably for a couple of weeks so the situation becomes more stable, and basically we expect a decline in our construction budget, which of course will improve the profitability of the project. So that's about the Hoffmann residence project.
Thank you very much, Edgars. I think it was a very interesting additional information. And for the existing investors, I can assure that we will also update you with what is going on with the project. I don't know how often at this point, but we'll try to do it a very periodic and fixed, basically updates and feedbacks of what is coming of our real estate team, so that you would be aware of what's next in the timeline and what is already happening on the project. We'll also most likely add additional stages of the project. So the first one is 250,000. Most likely there will be other coming as well, as soon as the project will need some extra financing, because obviously there's no need for us to attract the funds if there's no good use to put those funds for the project. And that's why we are also sharing the timeline, which is available also in your investor profile. If you go to this specific project, you can find an Excel download where you can find all the financials, so basically the business plan and also the timing of the project. Edgar's already mentioned that there might be some slight delays due to some interest from our side to get better offers when we basically work with our partners in construction, or probably also other parts of the deal as well. At this point, I will share the screen where we have your questions coming in on Slido app. So I hope you will be also able to see that. So I have shared it right now as well. So I will start with the first one. So now I see that there's 22 questions coming in. The first one is on the topic of financial crisis that we already touched upon. So,
Roberts, excuse me. Unfortunately, I don't see the screen you have shared.
Okay, just a second. So I will just stop it and go back to that. Share screen.
Yes.
So now you see it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. So the first question, as I already touched upon, is about the financial crisis and how are we planning to deal with that. So maybe Edgars can give just a short update once again on how we're going to handle the crisis in the real estate sector.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, I'm just considering if it's meant about this particular Hoffmann residence project or in general. So let's speak about Hoffmann residence project, how it's expected to deal with the crisis. First of all, what we see is that we initially were not expecting to get any bank loans, so we are still in the same position, so it doesn't affect so much in that respect. What we see is that the biggest challenge for the project is the sales. What we were expecting to do the sales in the autumn, so we have to postpone the expectancy of selling the apartments in the autumn. The solution is very simple, of course. We rent out the apartments, so we continue generating cash flow. This cash flow is quite significant, as these rent rates, even assuming that they might fluctuate a little bit, they will be still quite nice in this area. And then we would do the sales in portions starting from the beginning of next year. But again, these are topics, just my comment, that these are topics we will adjust on a weekly and monthly basis. What we have done in terms, if you look more generally to the real estate sector, I think in the last 2 weeks, the task for the financial analyst is to prepare a special analytics tool for us in-house. So what we did, we analyzed all the statistic data, what we can generate, from which we can understand what's happening in the market. So we took, I think, 5 to 7 different statistic data providers, and I think 30 to 40 statistic sources that we can use. A lot of them will be published monthly. So basically we'll have each month an update, how we see that economy is changing. Starting from, for instance, what data we're going to use. We use, of course, the unemployment rates. We'll use the average salary, which is affected by the unemployment and the work output. Then we are looking at construction data. For instance, we are looking at how many months ahead the construction companies have work and signed agreements. So very different statistical data we can analyze to understand what's the right moment for us to get the right deal for the construction costs, and also what's the right moment to start the sales of apartments. this would be our tool package for the existing situation. One thing which I maybe should mention, we are in the very attractive position with the new transactions, as we haven't closed those deals I mentioned you before. So we can renegotiate the prices or the conditions of the deals, which is important. And this is an advantage for us in the market. Unfortunately, for other players in the market who have already large portfolios and they have done the transactions before, let's say 2018, 2019, for them, this option is not on the table because they have already fixed the acquisition prices of the assets. So I would say we have a huge advantage in the market in this respect.
Perfect. I think that it's a really useful update from your side. And again, I think, well, at least what I'm hearing about that this, at least the center of the city or the old city or the riverside region is always performing quite well, and at least in the rental sector as well when the previous crisis, for example, came. So the price fluctuations aren't that big as compared to some urban or more suburban areas of the city. So I think that that's also a great thing about the first project. I will be moving next towards to the next question. So the question is, who will be in charge of getting new projects? Will you have your in-house architect and urban planning team?
Mm-hmm. I guess this question I should address as well. So how we organize the process. So we have in our team, me and Oskars, we are responsible about sourcing new projects. When we find a project, we have an in-house investment committee team. So we gather all the data necessary for the decision, and then we make the first decision if we see that we should proceed with the due diligence of the particular project. Then we have a project manager, which has extensive experience in structural engineering. She's very highly knowledgeable also about the historical buildings. So what we do, we analyze from very different aspects. From the technical point of view, if it's an existing building, we analyze the territory plan, we discuss with the construction board, with the development department in the city. Some cases we attract architects because we sometimes do a small, let's say, design model to understand the sellable areas and the buildable areas. From our experience, as we have a very, let's say, a broad partners list in terms of architects, we prefer doing external that for each particular case when we need it. So when we have done the primary due diligence, then we start to get into legal due diligence. For instance, in some cases when we buy a land plot, we also look at the topography of the land plot. We check the nearby connections of electricity, water, etc., etc. We do on our own funds, we do a drilling in the ground. We check the geology of the land plot because we have to understand how expensive or non-expensive is going to be the foundations of the building, which is an issue in Riga city. Then we, for instance, for warehouse and stock office projects, we also go to the infrastructure department or transportation department of Riga city to understand what access points we'll get from the main road, so it becomes more attractive to the tenants. So I would say on average, we spend around 3 months of due diligence per project till we start drafting the sales and purchase agreement.
Okay, perfect. So I will just also give a small update to the listeners and viewers. So as I said, the webinar will be 45 minutes long, but as we are getting quite a lot of questions, I guess we'll just continue till 2 o'clock and try to address as many questions as we can in the next 11 minutes. So without any further ado, I will address next question. So do you see the real estate prices falling in the next 3 to 6 months?
Okay. This is the question I receive on phone or in text messages quite often. So again, I would not like to forecast anything, but I would say that we shouldn't expect significant drop in the real estate prices. There are several reasons which are making the situation very different from how it was 13 years ago. So number one, if let's look at the residential segment, apartments and houses. The first is the reason why people are selling something. So usually the reason is either they want to have something better or larger, or they are not able to cope with the costs and they want to have something smaller or cheaper. And so in these cases, or the third reason is that they have real estate which they are not using and they want to sell to get cash. So in all of these cases, there is an option to wait. So you can wait to get something better, you can wait to get something cheaper, and you can wait to sell the real estate you're not using. What is very different is that on average, all the banks, which are usually creditors of the real estate owners, most of the cases, they have defined that you get 6 months, let's say, vacation from your principal payments. So there is no pressure from the bank side for the owners of the real estate to sell it. So I think that's a very good indicator why we wouldn't see so many prices falling. Again, the other alternative is to rent out the real estate. So if you look at the situation, if somebody was expecting to sell an apartment for a price of 100,000 euros and all the offers they get is 80,000 euros, they have an option to rent the real estate out, receive the rent, and then sell it again close to 100,000 euros when the market is back on track. So I wouldn't expect a general drop of the real estate prices, but I think there will be some sweet deals, but most of them will be allocated to something which is not liquid. For instance, it's a land for a development, something which is still you have to invest, you have to do a design or do the building. What could be interesting also, some properties which need a lot of, let's say, running costs of the properties are high, but they are not generating any income. Let's say somebody owns a huge residential building in the city center, they have to pay the taxes, they have to pay the bills and everything, and they are not getting any cash flow. So these specific cases might have some prices falling. So this is what we as an investment and development party, this is what we are focusing mostly. But I think for a general market, it will be less options on the table.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. The next question is about other platforms. So Baltic real estate crowdfunding is well covered by established platforms like Estate Guru and Crowd Estate. So how is TWINO different and better? And the next question is pretty much the same. So how are you different from other crowdfunding platforms? So I will just briefly answer it from my side, and then I will give the floor to Edgars as well. So I think that the biggest difference in our case, as for TWINO, it is typically, to be honest, also with our previous products, which is investments through consumer or business loans, is that those loans are in-house. So we issue those loans from our balance sheet at the very beginning. So we do all the risk assessment side. So we will do the risk scoring, so credit risk scoring for the consumer borrowers mostly. We get all kind of data from registers to understand what is their current liabilities and how likely they are to repay the loans. So that's our key thing. So our key knowledge that we can use in the lending business. And then when we do those steps, only then investors can invest in those loans as we have issued them. So it's very similar also in this case with real estate projects. Because, I mean, again, typically on the platforms, you would see loans or projects that are being crowdfunded that are coming from multiple developers or private individuals that want to develop a real estate. While in our case, those are projects that we have assessed before. So our team with Edgars and other team members are assessing a lot, like really a lot of projects, and only few of them are being considered as an investment. Then we also take a look on those projects from our TWINO side, so TWINO team side, whether it's a worthwhile investment. And again, only then you as investors have access to that particular project. So there are many steps that the project have to take, and a lot of due diligence done prior to any investor can really make an investment in the project. And the last thing that comes from my side, and I think it's the most important one, so TWINO is making money from the lending business, and in this case also from real estate development projects. So in our best interest, it's always not only to assure that those projects are good for our investors, but in the very basis, it have to be good for us as well. Because if we can't make money from this development project, then it's not something that we will be very likely to put our money in. So that's the key thing that I think is important to look from the investor's perspective. That TWINO always are trying to make money for ourselves and our investors by trying to find the best deals in the market.
Yes, maybe I will comment from my side. The principal difference is that all the real estate investment decisions are made in-house. So I have experience also with other platforms, and I would say that one challenge what the platforms have is that the partners, who they are bringing on board, who are attracting the financing, they have a challenge that it's very hard to make sure that these partners are expressing all the information honestly, and that something is not missed between the lines. And platforms can do the work as good as they can, but still these are independent organizations which are attracting the financing. So it always remains on the sponsor shoulders if they are honest and transparent or not. In this case, I saw this in my previous experience as the biggest challenge, because you spend so much time to analyze the prudential topics about the sponsor, and still you have to structure very complicated agreements to make sure that the interests of investors are protected. And even though it doesn't always solve the case, as you have seen in the market some not pleasant cases where still some sponsors are using crowdfunding and peer-to-peer lending platforms to trick investors and the platforms themselves as well. So I think that this is big advantage, that there is a full in-house responsibility about the projects. And maybe I can also slide to the next topic, which is of course what you ask, which makes sense, and I think this is what we have to express, and we are not hiding this at all. So these companies, the development companies, the beneficiaries of them are TWINO founder and owner Armāns Broks, who is the major shareholder, and me as a minority shareholder. And I think it's quite it's public, so you can check in the public registers. For instance, SIA Kudi 13, you'll see in public registers that we are the beneficiaries. So this is basically coming back to that TWINO is as invested as the investors, as they are taking the risk in those projects, and so all our interest is to make profit. If we look at the how the proceeds of the project are, let's say, directed, first and almost we have to understand that before beneficiaries of the company are receiving any profits, all the loans have to be repaid with the interest agreed on the agreement. So it means basically that the owner's profit is subordinated to the TWINO lenders' returns. I hope I made it clear.
I think it was pretty straightforward, but anyway, if you have any questions, dear listeners and viewers, then just ask them, and we'll address as many as we can. So a bit to continue on the legal side, I see a question that is pretty specific about this particular project. So about the legal structure of the financing deal, basically. So the question is, SPV SIA Code 13 has been established solely for this project, but an assignment agreement at COC Finance, to whom I will lend the money. Then why you need SPV? So from my side, how I would address it, and it a bit comes together with a question that is about EU crowdfunding law. So currently our business module and our financing module is that we are using assignment rights. So we are assigning claim rights towards a loan. And in this case, OC Finance, it's an TWINO Group's entity. So it's our loan originator in Latvia, and it's a licensed entity in the lending business. It's an loan originator for this particular loan that is given to Code 13, which is the SPV or special purpose vehicle for this particular project. So what effectively happens is OC Finance is giving that money to this project, and you as investors can buy claim rights and being basically a part of this financing deal. To answer the question why there is a necessity for SPV, maybe Edgars can also address it from the real estate side, but in our platform business as a whole, we are undergoing a licensing process for the investment side, so going to acquire an investment brokerage license in Latvia. And that's why we have to stick to the module, how do we work? And that's why we can't really transition that easily to this mentioned EU crowdfunding law, which is also something that we are looking into. And in the future, there might be some projects that might already work under this law, but as you know, it's still in the process, and there are some open questions, and there are still no licenses in EU. So we're also taking the steps so that we could do that in the future as well. But under the current business module of TWINO, we are doing this similarly as we would do with consumer and or business loans. So Edgars, maybe you have something.
I will give a comment about the SPV. Establishing an SPV for a real estate development project, it's a very common practice. The main reason is that this project or this company has a separate balance sheet, separate profit and loss statement. So usually that's how you structure the real estate investment in a development project. So kind of I would say this is an advantage for an investor, because this particular SPV is developing only this particular project, and it has liabilities only regarding this particular project. So there are no cross collaterals or, I don't know, some other activities which might affect the result of that particular project.
Thank you. Next question. I guess we'll take the last three questions because we're already over the time. But again, you can always ask those questions. If those are in detail questions, do not hesitate to ask our client support to info@twino.eu, which is quite responsive and will answer pretty quickly to you. If there are some difficult questions, then sure, just address them, and we'll come back to you, and we'll contact Edgars if necessary for some more in detail information. So one of the last three questions is, as investors are getting fixed return, who will keep the profits of the project? Who is the equity holder? How much equity is invested in the project?
I guess I should address that one.
Yeah, I guess.
Okay, so let's look at there is an SPV which is SIA Code 13. There are two equity holders. I think it's 70% is owned by Armāns Broks, 30% is owned by me, Edgars Ivanovs. This is you can check this in public registers. As you understand the system, so basically, as the loan has a fixed return, the profits above the return are distributed between the equity holders. So the equity, how much equity is invested in the project? Of course, from the balance sheet point, you see the share capital, which is one way to look at it. The other way to look at it, which is actually the biggest challenge in the crowdfunding and peer-to-peer lending market in Baltics, is the value of the property. So the value of the property versus the liabilities of the company, I would say it's very hard to define, as value before COVID crisis was one. Today, the value is different. So most probably we should do evaluation to see how much equity is in the project. So I can't answer specifically today in terms of the valuation of the property.
Yeah, but that's something that we'll be working on and trying to keep up with the crisis to manage also the pricing and everything related to this project and any other project. About the equity structure, so yes, as Edgars mentioned, it's very straightforward. So TWINO founder is majority stakeholder, and Edgars is also a stakeholder in the project. So both of them as involved parties are extremely interested to make the project profitable, to cover all the liabilities, and also to have some profits after the project is basically finished. The next question is about the aforementioned crowdfunding law. Yes, it's currently, I think there's already final version available, and we have read it and we are aware of the limitations, and that's one of the reasons why we are also undergoing the licensing process in Latvia. It will be a different kind of license, but under that we can also fund other type of projects by introducing financial instruments. So the investors will not buy claim rights with assignment agreements, but instead of that, they will purchase financial instruments that might come in multiple forms. But we still have to wait some time until that process. And there is a possibility that we also might have a different legal entity for crowdfunding projects, but that is something that we are still looking into, and I can't say that for sure. Next question, and I guess that's the last question. So it's coming from Anonymous, so I don't know whom, but when do you plan to add new projects in TWINO Ventures? About this topic, we are also constantly looking for good projects, and I think that we can kind of give you a heads up about the next one, as it's already in the final stages of the pipeline, and it might be coming back already during April. So we are finalizing some visuals and also the structure of the deal. And maybe Edgars can give you some small tweak of what is coming in that project as well.
Yes, the next project which is going to be public is the residential development in the city center. It's coming to a stage where it's a full construction permit in the summer. So it's going to be more than 100 apartments in one residential development, city center. It could be considered as a medium segment, not the premium, not the economy.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Again, there are still some questions that we haven't answered, but as said previously, do not hesitate to contact us. We'll be very responsive. You can also contact our customer support, but ask them to contact me or Edgars if that is necessary for yourself, and you can reach out and you can organize a call or something if that works better for you. So thank you very much for coming to our first webinar. I think and I really hope that it was informative for you, and it was worthwhile to spend this hour more or less with us. A thing that we would really evaluate a lot is a feedback. So as this is the first one, we obviously would like to understand whether it was good and whether it was something that you're interested in also in the future. And if it is so, then we'll try to organize these kind of webinars also in the coming weeks or months. So feedback would be very much appreciated. And if there were some things that you didn't like at all, maybe presentations were too long or something, then feel free to express that as well, as we will really evaluate that. So maybe there are some final words from Edgars as well.
I want to thank everyone for watching and listening, and hope we're going to see each other in the next webinar again, and good health to everyone.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for watching. And if any questions come up, do not hesitate to contact us. Wishing you a great rest of the week. Stay at home. And if we stay at home, then sooner or later we'll overcome this crisis, which I think currently is the main thing. So stay safe, stay home, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.